Hey guys, so today we're going to make an image based on Super Smash Bros. For the Nintendo 64. I thought it might be fun to reduce it down even further, like if it was made for the Game Boy Advance or something like the Super Nintendo. Super Smash Bros. For Nintendo 64 is something that really sparked my love of drawing, but also is a game that I played a lot of whenever I was a kid, so I just wanted to make a fan art piece of it. I can recount some stories a little bit later in the video. Now we're just setting up the base of this, so let's do that first and then I'll come back in later. Alright, so I think it's obvious the level that I'm referencing here. I'm referencing the level Dreamland. Dreamland to me was the level that stood out the most, I think, whenever I was a kid, just because of the randomness of the wind blowing, and you trying to fight against it, and you're trying to fight your friends, or you're trying to fight your enemies to keep from getting blown off the actual level, and you're fighting a lot at the edges. And just it had that classic three-tiered structure where there was the three platforms in the middle. But more than I want to recount the actual level or talk about its aesthetics or talk about any of that other stuff, I want to talk about Super Smash Bros. 64 as a game that really changed my life. Around the time that the original Smash 64 came out, I was a pretty young kid. I was just getting into drawing, just starting drawing. I can remember that my parents had just purchased me a Nintendo 64 and I was in kindergarten. And I remember coming home from kindergarten and there being a Nintendo 64 in the back of my parents' car and saying, "What is that?" My mom was like, "That's a video game system." And I was like, "What's a video game system?" And me going home, and my mom had purchased Super Mario 64, but also had purchased Diddy Kong Racing, and those being the two games that I had. But in saying that, my parents didn't have a ton of money because I had couple other siblings. So to say that outside of the video games that I got for Christmas or the video games that I got for my birthday, the only real video games that I played were ones that we could rent from the video store, which was called Hollywood Video, which was right down the street from my parents' house. So we would go there once a week and just rent games. And I remember it wasn't long after I had gotten the Nintendo 64, they held the game set up on the shelves, and I remember really being entranced by the cover art for Super Smash Bros. 64. I didn't have a clue what it was. All I knew there were some characters on the cover that I recognized. I recognized Pikachu and I recognized Mario, and I didn't recognize the other characters on the cover. Since I recognized them and I knew what Pokemon was and I knew what Super Mario was, I said, I want to try this. And I remember taking it home and setting it up in the corner of my room and putting it in and just being like, what kind of game is this? What is Super Smash Bros.? What does Super Smash Bros. Have to do with Super Mario or have to do with Pikachu? But more than anything that kind of grabbed my attention about this game was the art style of the cover art just in general. So like I said, I was a kid who's kind of into drawing already, and this was a very illustrative, kind of cartoony art style that wasn't something that I had seen before in connection to video games. I'd only seen it in cartoons, and I've not seen this very bold style in relationship to video games, other than the basic computer graphics or something that was on the cover of Diddy Kong Racing or Super Mario, which was just these pre-rendered versions that were on the covers to kind of indicate the graphics. This was kind of like a sidestep to that, and maybe wasn't as indicative of what was happening in the game. But regardless of all that, as I stepped into actually playing it, I would play it for a week and then I'll rent it again. I would play it for a week and then I'll rent it again. I'll play it for a week and I'll rent it again. And my mom eventually was like, well, we're spending so much money renting this game, why don't we just buy you it? And I can't recall if it was a Christmas present or if it was a birthday present, but it was one of those two things. Because I remember seeing the box and being like, oh my god, this is the box that goes with that game that was on the shelf at the store. And just seeing that little teeny tiny tab of the cover that's on the actual sticker of the game now being in this perfect, amazing box. And so then pulling out of that, at this time, there were instruction booklets that came with the game. And this is one of the things that really cemented my love of drawing. I remember flipping through this instruction booklet and having that same kind of cartoony art style with all of the character art that existed on the inside of it. And drawing and being like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this. This is mind-blowing. And just thinking of that time period about how video games really interwove themselves into my love of drawing. And those two things perpetuated each other. And it still exists now. I mean, here I am drawing a cartoon picture of a video game character in a style that's inspired by video games. And along the way, I'll flash some of those instruction booklet screen caps that I found online on the screen, just so you can kind of see the same art that I was looking at. But I was always drawing these characters, always trying to draw them in the style, and obviously, just as Nintendo had planned, it introduced me to other franchises, and I became aware of things like Star Fox, or became aware of things like F-Zero, or became aware of things like Metroid. What are these things? And exploring. And at this time, the internet was, I would say, still pretty young, but it became to the point where it was a situation where I would sit at the computer for hours and just find pictures of fan art of all these games that I loved and didn't know anything about some of them, but loving the characters, liking their character designs. And it really didn't stop there. Once that I played the first Smash Brothers, it was something that I just really was attuned to moving forward. And I can remember even still, it was around the time that Nintendo 64 was starting to die down a little bit, and the GameCube came out. I remember me and my siblings saving up for a GameCube, and at that time, Melee was out, or Melee was to be released. I can't remember how long after it was released that we purchased it, but it doesn't matter. But Melee came out, and I remember my sisters and I had spent months and months saving up our allowance money trying to get to the point where we could buy a GameCube. But my mom said that she would pay for a quarter of it. So I think at that time, like, a GameCube was $200, and then the game was 50 or 60. I don't recall what they were in that moment. But I remember I was up the street at some neighbor friend's house, and we were playing in the backyard. And I remember my sister, she came running up the street. She was like, "You gotta come down here, you gotta come down here, oh my god, you gotta come down here. Mom said that we're gonna go buy a GameCube." And we were like, "Oh my god." So then me and my neighbor friends, we ran down the street a million miles an hour, and I was like, "Hey, can they come with us? Can they come with us?" My mom was like, "Sure." So we went to GameStop at the local mall at the time, whenever malls were a bigger thing. And so we went to GameStop and went in there, and they had the kiosk that had Super Smash Bros. Melee outside. And I remember seeing, and I can't remember what level it was. It was like the story level, but it was a fountain. It had a fountain in the background. It was Kirby inspired, and just hearing the music and seeing that, I'm like, "Oh my god, this is the game that existed not that long ago, and it looked way different, and it looks way better now, and the music's amazing, and everything's insane," and just being so excited. And so even like that moment of purchasing a GameCube has the connection to Smash Brothers, and spending countless hours playing Melee, trying to get all the characters. Me and my sister spending hours and hours and hours trying to get Mewtwo, or trying to leave the GameCube on. I think that there was a thing that you could leave the GameCube on for 24 hours or something, and then you unlock Mewtwo, or you could play a certain amount of matches. But we would play like the sudden death matches, where we would just immediately self-destruct so that we could have the match over with, and once it reached a certain counter, then we would get the character. And then even venturing forward from there, years later, I guess at that point I was a late middle schooler when the Wii came out, and then Smash Bros. Brawl came out. And then I remember it was before I had a headset, and I would call my friend on the phone, and we would play Smash Bros. Brawl while I was on the home phone, and my grandmother was trying to call, and she was like, "Somebody's on the phone, somebody's been on the phone all day long." And it's like, yeah, well, we've been playing Smash Brothers Brawl. So like, this series is something that's really endured for me throughout the course of my entire life. It's something that's really inspired a lot of creativity in my life, and it's also something that kind of sparked the path that I'm on now, which is insane to think about, that this game changed my life that much. And if you guys have a game that has changed your life just as much as this one has changed my life, then share it below. Tell me your little story about it. Tell me your thoughts and feelings and emotions and connections, that kind of thing, because I think that kind of stuff is super interesting. And I know everybody has that kind of thing that they feel inspired by, that really sparked that childlike creativity for them and really got them moving in a direction. But we're at the end of the video now. I've rambled a lot longer than I normally do, because I thought that it hopefully was interesting or exciting to you guys. But here's the final image. Hope that you guys enjoy it. Thanks for watching the video. If you liked it, make sure to like it. If you like stuff like this, then make sure to subscribe to the channel. But anyways, that's it. Thanks for listening to me ramble. I'm out of here. Bye, guys.